Okay, this is lecture number 16. We have covered the minerals in lecture number 15. So, lecture number 15 was all about the minerals of India, and we discussed all both the metallic as well as non-metallic minerals. And on the basis of these minerals, we discussed the mines, and these mines will be used in the industries topic. So, before looking into or discussing this, we must have the idea about the minerals of India, which we have done in the last class. So, before starting the lecture number 16, that is about industries, there is a request that you please subscribe the channel. Okay, so let us now start with the lecture number 16, and the lecture number 16 is we will discuss the industries, and mainly the section pertains to the location of industries, right? And the location of industry, the theory that is required for understanding the location of industry is the Weber theory. So Weber gave the industrial location theory. Okay, we will look first in the Weber theory, and then we will discuss the location of whether it is iron based industry or it is the aluminium bauxite or the sugarcane or jute. So all those industries we will discuss on the basis of the Weber theory, right? So locational aspects are very important. So let us discuss or start with that first. Weber location theory. Locational theory. See, one thing that we must know about the Weber locational theory is that before giving the locational theory, Weber assumed the factors as the isotropic. So isotropic factors means everything is uniform, constant. That means there is no dis in there is uniformity in the surface, right? So that is the isotropic surface means. But the Weber locational theory is a normative theory, right? Is a normative theory, and the main aspects that were given by the Weber, they were based on the first aspect was based on the raw material, so he argued that the location of industry is based on the raw material, right? But later on, the Weber modified his theory and included additional two or factors, and these two factors were, one was the labor, okay, and the second one was the agglomeration. Okay, these were the three factors which Weber overall included. But in today's world, if you see, these are not the only three factors which affect the location of industries. Today, the location of industries is affected by more complex set of factors, right? Because, for example, labor has become more mobile. Okay, so you cannot say that the areas where the labor is present or the population density is very heavy, so there is labor presence, so in essence there must be presence of industry. This argument does not hold any longer, because for example, if you see Bihar or Chhattisgarh region, these regions have the high population density but devoid of the industries. That means the old argument of the Weber does not hold true in case of many industries, right? Similarly, agglomeration, if you say that the industries always agglomerate, this also does not hold in the present context when the whole setup of industry has delocalized. Okay, now it does not matter for an IT industry whether it locates itself in a big IT park or somewhere outside where rents are low. So again, agglomeration factor has also been weakened because of present day conditions of delocalization and other liberal conditions, right? With regard to raw material, that Weber said the raw material influence the location of industry, but in today's context it is not always true that raw material affect the location of industries because of the invention of new mode of transportation, right? The raw material transportation has become easier, so that means raw material significance has also reduced, but that never means that raw material is no longer influential factor in determining the location of industry. It is a factor. So this is the basic brief that I want to give you about these three factors which the Weber thought of. But now let us discuss the theory in more detail. Basically, first of all, let us discuss the location of industries. Location of industries as per the hypothesis of the Weber. For example, if industry is based on one raw material, industry requires just one raw material. That means when single raw material is required, when single raw material is required, right? And now in this we can make two cases. Number one, if raw material is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous means it is present everywhere. Present everywhere. Okay. Now in this case, when the raw material is ubiquitous, okay, the industry can be established whether in the market location or anywhere. But where will we establish the industry? For example, the raw material is present everywhere, but market is here. This is the location of market. So obviously we will try to establish the industry near to the market, so that because the raw material is present everywhere. But what we want to minimize, the transportation cost of the finished product. Okay, for example, this is market. Okay, raw material is present here in this area, raw material. So obviously what I would do, I would establish industry as close as to the market, so that because the raw material can be transported to the industry, but the finished product is very cheap to transport to the market if we establish close to the market. So when raw material is ubiquitous, establish the industry near the market. Now come the second case, when if the raw material is not ubiquitous. If raw material is not ubiquitous, now in this case there are the two possibilities. What are the two possibilities? When the raw material is not ubiquitous, either raw material is pure. If raw material is pure raw material means it is not a weight losing or weight gaining. That means, for example, this is the raw material center. Okay, this is raw material center, this is market. Okay, now we have to establish industry. It is your choice whether you establish industry here, whether you establish industry at this location. It does not matter, because when you transfer raw material from here to here, let us say it is 10 kg. Okay, after processing at the industrial location, the matter which will come out of the industry will again be of 10 kg. So you are ultimately transporting 10 kg throughout the route. So it does not matter whether you establish it here or here. So in case of pure raw material, it does not matter, you establish anywhere in between the road linking the market and the raw material center. Now comes the second. This is the first point, when the raw material is not ubiquitous. Now if raw material is not pure, the second case here is if raw material is not pure. Okay, that means raw material is either weight. In this case again we can make two cases. What can be the two cases? If weight gaining or weight losing. Now let me explain these two also. See, in weight gaining, let us take the example of the assembly or automation industries. Automation industry. What happened in the automation industry? It is a weight gaining industry. There will be a lot of parts which will be assembled in a car, and a car will become whole bulkier than transporting individual tires, springs, and many other subcomponents. That means it is a weight gaining. So in case of weight gaining, what you do is, for example, this is the raw material center and this is market, right? In case of weight gaining, you establish the industry close to market. So in this case, what I will do, I will establish the industry close to the market. Okay, this will be the, because weight gaining industry, it is more easy, more cheaper that we establish it market, because that will be the in that case transportation cost will be low. Now but when the raw material is weight losing, right? Raw material is weight losing. For example, in case of sugarcane. Okay, it is weight losing. So what you do is you establish the industry near the raw material center. So for example, this is raw material center, this is market. Okay, what you do is you establish the industry at close to the raw material. Okay, this is industry, because it is, you are transporting heavy matter to the industry, and the matter which will come out will be very light. So lighter matter that will come out of the industry will be cheaper to transport to the market center rather than the heavier matter which is coming out of this center. And very, so this we have to keep this distance minimum and this distance maximum in case of weight losing raw material. So these are the many cases and the sub cases that we discuss if the raw material is one. See, in all the cases that we discussed, the raw material was one. But if the raw material requires are two, for example in iron and steel industry, what happens, the raw material are two. Which are the two raw material? One is coal and another is the iron ore. Okay, so there are two raw materials. Similarly, in case of the aluminium industry, there are two raw material. One raw material is the HEP, hydroelectric power, and another raw material is the bauxite. So when the raw material are two, then what to do? Okay, in that case also the Weber gave a new concept, that is the locational triangle concept. But when so what we are saying here, if raw material are two, okay, now if raw material are two, and let us say one raw material is ubiquitous, let us say out of these two the first raw material is ubiquitous. Okay, it is present everywhere, but the second material is localized, right? Second material is localized. Now this ubiquitous raw material definitely is present everywhere, so it will not impact the location of industry. The material which is localized will impact the location of industry. Okay, now when this raw material impact the location of industry, that means all the cases that we discussed above will come into play, that if raw material is weight gaining or weight losing or it is pure. So all these matters will come into play under this head, right, under this head. So this is if raw material are two but one is ubiquitous. Now when both raw material are localized, now second case, that when both raw materials are localized, when both raw materials are localized, now this become a tricky case when both raw materials are localized. In this case, Weber said you make a locational triangle, and this is called locational triangle, and all sides are equal. That means it is a equilateral triangle, right? It is an equilateral triangle, and on the two vertices you draw the raw material 1, and on the other vertices you draw the raw material 2, and on the third vertices we will draw the market, right? Now the process will be same here as well, that we discussed earlier. So the basic formula will remain same, that is if weight gaining, if industry is weight gaining, if it is weight gaining, for example assembly type industries, then the industry will migrate towards the market, right? But in case of weight losing, so this is a separate case. If weight gaining, industry will migrate towards the market. But if weight losing, in that case industry will migrate toward the raw material center. But towards which raw material center will the industry migrate? The raw material which is more weight losing, towards that industry will migrate, right? And for this again Weber gave a mathematical concept, that is called the material index. Now what is material index? Material index is weight of raw material divided by weight of finished good, right? Now if material index is more than 1, right, in that case industry will migrate toward the raw material center. Industry will migrate towards raw material center, right? And if the material index is less than 1, mi is less than 1, then industry will migrate towards market, right? So this is all about the first aspect. What was the first aspect? That is the raw material, how the raw material can affect the location of industry. Okay, that is this part, raw material part. This second part, that is labor and the agglomeration, they also affect the location of industry. So no, see how the labor affect the location of industry. Let us say you, after the after calculating all types of the transportation cost, that is the transportation cost of raw material, transportation cost of the finished good, you have arrived at this location, that this is the perfect location for industry. Okay, this is perfect location for industry. This is market here, this is raw material 1, this is raw material 2, right? And you establish that this is the perfect location for industry after calculating all the transportation cost. But this, it is not only the transportation cost which affects the revenue of a industry. Okay, the revenue of industry also depends upon the labor cost. Okay, now what I am saying is, now labor will come and work at this place, or you will hire the local labor. But what I am saying, the labor which is present at this point is more costly as compared to the labor which is present at this point. So what industry will try to do? Industry will try to shift or migrate toward the least labor cost location. So what I am saying, this is the least labor cost location. Least labor. So this is least labor cost location, and this has the low labor cost as compared to this point. What happened? Wait a minute. Sorry. So this is the least labor cost location. Okay, so industry is migrating toward this point. Now as the industry is migrating, you have to keep another factor is on mind, that as the industry migrate, the transportation cost will start increasing. Okay, transportation cost will start increasing. But this is now when there comes a point where the decrease in labor cost, there comes arrives a point where decrease in labor cost is compensated by increase in transportation cost. Okay, what I am saying is, this is this point. Now you cannot go beyond this point, because if you go beyond this point, even if you have low labor cost, your transportation cost will increase far more than you are saving on the labor cost. This point is, and the critical this isodapane is called the critical isodapane. This isodapane that you will draw here, this is called the critical isodapane. So this is the critical isodapane. Okay, so this is how the labor influences the location of industries, right? So this is again an important one. Now we have done the basic concepts of the Weber locational theory. On the basis of these locations, we will try to model the location of the, first of all, the iron and steel industry. So let us study the location of iron and steel industry in India, right? So we are starting with the main topic, that is location of iron and steel industry. Now, as we said, that location of iron and steel industry has changed through time. How has it changed through times? In earlier times, during, more particularly during industrial revolution, at that time 8 parts of coal, 8 parts of coal were required to produce one part of iron, to produce one part of what? Sorry, one part of steel. Right. That means you need have large amount of coal. So industries were established in the coal-based locations. For example, Bokaro Steel Plant. Okay. Durgapur Steel Plant. So these are based on the coal based locations. Okay, now as the technology improved, the amount of coal required to produce one part of steel reduced. That means now we just required what? One part of coal and two part of iron ore, two part of iron ore to produce one part of steel. That means now we need more iron ore. So in this case what happened, industries migrated towards the iron ore center. So what happened, industries migrated toward iron ores. Right, example you can remember the Bhilai steel plant. Okay, Jamshedpur steel plant. Okay, Bhadravati steel plant, Bhadravati steel plant in Karnataka. Okay, so this is the second aspect, that as the technology improved, the industry migrated towards the iron ore centers. Now what is the trend in present time? Okay, in 21st century, because of the many factors, for example the incentive by government. Okay, presence of scrap iron and steel in cities. Along with this, the presence of along with this presence of capital plus labor plus market, all these factors have affected the location of industry, iron and steel industries, and many steel plants have come up in the many steel plants have come up in cities. Have Okay, so this is the recent trend. So we saw the three trends basically. One is the based on the coal location, then iron ore based location, and third one is the which are the market based locations. Okay, now let us look at individually. Okay, on the triangle basis, that we studied the Weber triangle, that how the Weber triangle influences the location of iron and steel industries in India. So first let me show you the coal based location. Right, coal based locations. The example that we can take for coal based location, as I said above, that is Bokaro. Now what happens in Bokaro steel plant, that the coal is taken from the Jharia, coal comes from Jharia. This is Jharia. Okay, and iron ore, it comes from Singhbhum. Okay, West Singhbhum. and the mines that we saw that yesterday, Kiriburu, Goa mines, all these mines, okay, Noamundi mines, okay, from there comes the iron ore. So the industry is something like that. This is eastern India, this is here, okay, okay, this is Damodar river here, like that, okay. This is here the Jharia coal fields, okay. Here it is Singhbhum, right. And industry is located close to coal fields, industry is located close to coal fields, so this is location of industry, okay. And this is here the railway line, okay. So and here it is Kolkata market, right. So these are the two raw material centers, right. And this is the industry location here, this is industry, right. So this is the locational triangle for the coal based location. Now as per the efficiency principle, if you ask as per efficiency principle, when the railway, so for example a train is bringing the coal from this point to this point and iron ore from this point to this point, okay. So according to efficiency principle, it would be better if the train which is coming from here to here, that is from Singhbhum to industry location Bokaro, it would be better for that train to take back the coal from Jharia at the Singhbhum part, okay. So this would be more efficient, right. And as per this efficiency principle led to the establishment of what, led to the establishment of Jamshedpur steel plant, okay. Now in Jamshedpur steel plant, what happens, the market is same, okay. The market is at Kolkata, right. This is raw material one center, that is Jharia, okay. The for coal fields, Jharia coal fields, right. And this is Singhbhum, from where iron ore will be sourced. As per the efficiency principle, now Jamshedpur has established close to the Singhbhum, that is the iron ore center. So this is the Jamshedpur here. Steel plant, right. So this is the second example for, this is iron based location, this is the iron ore based location, okay. Now another iron ore based location, if you see, it is the Bhadravati, right. So what happens, this is the raw material one center, that is the Kudremukh iron ore mines, Kudremukh iron ore, raw material 2, that is coal, which is imported through Mangalore port, okay. Coal is imported through this port, and the industry has established close to the iron ore center, that is the Kudremukh iron ore, that is at this place, okay. This is market here, okay. This is industry, right. Another iron ore based plant, that is the Bhilai. So in case of Bhilai, let me again make the triangle, Weber triangle. So raw material 1 is the iron ore, raw material 1 is iron ore, and iron ore is sourced from the Dalli Rajhara mines in Bastar Plateau. From here iron is sourced, okay. And raw material 2 center is the coal, and the coal is taken from the Durg mines, sorry, not Durg, Korba. This is coal center, okay. This is coal center, and industry has established close to the iron ore, that is here, and it is the Bhilai steel plant, right? Okay, and this is market here, that is Kolkata. Okay, so this is industry here. So this is the coal based, iron ore based industry that we see. First is the Jamshedpur, then in the here in the Bhadravati steel plant, and then here the Bhilai, right? Moving on to the one more location, that is the port based location. The new type of location that have come up, that is the port based location. And the important port based location for iron and steel is the Visakhapatnam. For Visakhapatnam steel plant, the market is in Japan, so the steel is exported from here and coal is imported from the Australia. So if you see the eastern coastline of India, this is here, this is Visakhapatnam, this is Visakhapatnam, right? One raw material, that is coal, that comes from Australia, right? Another raw material is the iron ore, that comes from the again Bela de la mines in Chhattisgarh. This is another raw material center, right? And the market, this is exported to the Japan, this is market, right? So this is again your triangle, so this becomes again your Weber triangles. Okay, so these are the different steel and iron and steel plants that we saw in India. Okay, moving on to the next, that is the okay, so iron and steel we did in complete detail. Moving on to the next industry, that is the aluminium industry. So aluminium is again a raw material based industry, again a raw material based industry, and raw material are two here. Number one is the HEP, hydroelectric power, and number two is bauxite. And this location, on the basis of these two, we will divide again on two parts, that is when both HEP and bauxite, hydroelectric power and bauxite, they are located away from each other. When, so the first part that we will do, when both HEP and bauxites are located away from each other. Now in this case, both I1, now first of all you must know that how the bauxite is converted into aluminium. Okay, it takes into the two processes. Number one is the whole process. Okay, the first one is the whole process. Now in the whole process, what happens? The bauxite, the ore of aluminium, is converted into alumina. Now this process, no large amount of impurity is removed from bauxite, so weight of the bauxite is reduced in significant proportion. This process we will call as I1, right? The second process, that is the electrolysis. Okay, for electrolysis we need electricity, that's why this process of converting alumina into aluminium is located close to the HEP center. So I2. Now what we said in the first, when both HEP, that is HEP and bauxites, are located away from each other, that means these both processes I1 as well as I2, we have to carry out these two processes separately in distant locations. Now as per this condition, as per these conditions, there are number of number of aluminum plants which are located. Now so first plant that we will do is Hindalco plants. So Hindalco plants. Now Hindalco plant, I1 is, that is the alumina first process, that is the Holz process, right? It happens near Ranchi. Okay, it happens near Ranchi, and for this aluminium is sourced from, or bauxite more properly, let us say it bauxite because that is the ore. Bauxite is taken from or sourced from Lohardaga mines. Lohardaga mines, right? This is the I1 process. Now first process has completed. Now we move on to the second process. This second process for Hindalco, that is the electrolysis, this happens near the Hirakud dam, and Hirakud dam electricity is used, right, because of presence of HEP. So this is Hindalco plant. Moving on to the Nalco plant, that is Nalco plant. Okay, in Nalco plant, I1, that is the bauxite, is sourced from the Manjodi mines or from Koraput. For example, the Manjodi, Panchpath Mali mines, more particularly the Panchpath Mali mines. Okay, this is I1. Okay, after that Holz process, we move on to the electrolysis. The electrolysis happens near Angul. Okay, here near Mahanadi Delta, we have the 600 megawatt thermal power plant. Thermal power plant. From here, the electricity is taken. So this is the Nalco plant. Moving on to the Vedanta plant. Okay. For Vedanta plant, I1, that is the bauxite, is sourced from the Lanjigad. Lanjigad, it is in Odisha. And I2, that is the electrolysis for HEP, from there is in Jharsuguda. So Jharsuguda. So they perform electrolysis at Jharsuguda because of presence of thermal HEP, thermal power plant in Jharsuguda. So this is about the Vedanta plant. Moving on to the next, that is the, again we did Hindalco plant 1. Okay, where the I1 was at the near Ranchi and I2 is from Hirakud. Another Hindalco plant where I1 is done at the Utkal in Odisha. Okay, the Holz process, and the I2, that is the electrolysis, this is performed at the, I think it is Sambalpur, in Sambalpur. Okay, there we have a thermal power plant. So this was the second power plant of the Hindalco. Now you must remember that what we are doing, the locations where the I1 and I2 processes are carried out at distant locations, because HEP and bauxites cannot be sourced from close locations to each other. When they are present close to each other, then what we will be trying to do, we will try to locate the industry close to the HEP station. So now let us look at the second part, that is when a raw material, that is bauxite, and HEP or cheap energy are located near to each other. Now what happens in this case? So this is the market here. Okay, this is the raw material one, that is cheap energy. Okay, this is raw material 2, that is bauxite. Right. So industry will be established close to HEP here, but we have to remember that both are close to each other, right? So this is the industry location. So at this point only, at this I point only, we will perform both the task, that is I1, okay, hose process, as well as electrolysis I2, right? So no problem in this. So let us do some of the plants which have this kind of location. The first plant is again Hindalco. Hindalco. Number 1 is the Renukut. Okay, Renukut is in UP. Okay, here we have the Rihand Dam. Okay, for HEP. And for bauxite is sourced from Lohardaga mines. And from Rihand Dam, HEP comes. So this is the first plant of the Hindalco. Second plant of Hindalco on this location is Belgaum. Here bauxite is sourced from Western Ghats. Bauxite comes from Western Ghats. Okay. And HEP comes from the Saravati power plant. This is the second plant of the Hindalco based on this location, where the both I1 I2 are performed close to each other. Moving on to the next, that is the Balco plant. First plant of Balco on this is in the Korba. Bauxite is taken from the Amarkantak plateau. Right. And near this Korba, at Korba, we have NTPC power plant. Okay. This acts as a source for energy. Second plant of Balco is in Koyna. Koyna is in Maharashtra. Right. For Koyna, bauxite is sourced from Western Ghats. And HEP is sourced from Koyna reservoir. We have Koyna hydroelectric plant here. So HEP is sourced from this plant. Okay, so this was the second one. Moving on to the next one, that is the Malco, Madras Aluminium Corporation Limited. For Malco, the first plant that is there is in Mettur. Okay, we have the Stanley reservoir here. Stanley reservoir, from where electricity is taken, Mettur Dam, and bauxite is taken from the Severo Hills. So this is the plant of Malco, right? So what we have done, by this time we have done the locations which were based on the when both bauxite and the cheap energy they are located near to each other, and on this basis we did few plants. One plant of Hindalco, that is in Renukut. Two plants basically of Hindalco, one is in Renukut, another is in Belgaum. Two plants of Balco, one is in Korba, another is in Koyna, and one plant of Malco, that is in Methur, right? Similarly, when both HEP and the bauxite source they are away from each other, for that we did the Hindalco plant. Okay, one plant of Hindalco was in Ranchi. Sorry, you have to remember that in this you cannot say that one plant is here. We are saying that two processes, I1 is process done is at Ranchi and I2 is done at Hirakund, right? And another was the Nalco plant, for which I1 is performed at the Koraput from Panchpatmali mines and I2 at Ongul Vedanta mines, Vedanta plant, and again the Hindalco plant, that is Utkal and Sambalpur. So this was the basically the aluminium industry, right? The first industry that we did the iron ore industry, right? So this is all about this class, right? Now the remaining industry we will start in the next class. Okay, we will start in the next class with the sugarcane industry. We will also do the jute industry, right? Paper industry, cement industry, okay. So these industries we will do in the next class. Okay, so this is it in this class. A request before closing the channel, please subscribe the channel. So thank you, and we will start with the next class, that is class number 16 from next class, right? So thank you.